December 1967, one of the most tragic disasters in the history of the U.S. occurs. The Silver Bridge connecting West Virginia to Ohio collapses in the middle of rush hour. Many people plunge to a watery grave. For months, there had been a feeling in the air, an ominous feeling. A year ago, strange creatures, UFOs, and strange visitors began to flock to the idyllic American town of Point Pleasant. Was this coincidence? Did they know something about the impending disaster? Was the moth-like specter haunting the woods trying to warn people? Find out this and more tonight. Welcome to Everything Vaguely Paranormal. What's up, guys?
I was gonna say, somebody say something.
I'm sorry. Sorry, it was the wind really picked up over here. It looks like it's about to storm, so I thought I heard some rumbles of thunder in the background.
Ryan, I got your wind.
Yeah, for those who don't know, Shelly had a wild ride last week. Do you want to talk about that for a minute, Shelly, before we get into this?
Sure. Welcome to Everything Vaguely Paranormal. I'm Shelly Pruitt. These are my partners in the paranormal, Mr. Blake Smith and Mr. Ryan Roberts.
Hey, y'all.
And we were not on last week because these two guys very kindly said that, hey, if you can't be on, we're not going to go on. We're going to post everything for a week and postpone it. And that's because those of you who know me, I live in Jacksboro, Texas. And if you have even remotely looked at the news, we were hit with an EF3 tornado last Monday that would have been the 21st. And that school that you've been seeing on the news that has the entire pretty much blown away, that's in my backyard. So my house did take a direct hit. However, we did not have the damage that our neighbors on the street in front of us and our neighbors on the street behind us had. Pretty much all of those houses were destroyed. We sit in a little bit lower area. Now, the adjuster was there today, guys.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So while the house is livable, it requires a structural enginener to come out
no.
Yeah, they think our foundation's actually shifted. So,
no.
And that we have a lot of cracks in the walls and around the doors. And we had a window blowout, but my family, we're all okay. I was in the house when it happened. And I'm going to tell you, by the time your ears pop, it's too late. It's on you. So I am an official tornado writer. And there hasn't been a tornado that hit Jacksboro in 107 years. I am real tired of being part of historical events. That's all I have to say about that. Done with it. Blake, do you happen to have that picture? By the way, if you are curious, if you saw this picture on the news, then you saw my front yard.
I can totally get it for just a second. If y'all give me just a second.
I'll tell you a quick story. So before gets that picture up there, we had a little lady yesterday. We were up in the front cleaning up the front of the property, and she drives by and she says, "Excuse me." Yes, ma'am. Little old lady, got a little old lady friend in the car with her. She goes, "Excuse me." I'm like, "Yes, ma'am. How can I help you?" I'm dirty. I'm streaked in sweat and dirt and filth and yuck and tornado bullshit. And she goes, "Where's that house that had the tree laying over in it?" She says, "We saw that on the news, and I brought my friend from Graham. We came up to see that tree." She goes, "I thought this is where it was. Isn't this where it is?" I said, "You about 2 days too late. We already cut that son bitch up." So, but yeah, if you watch Channel 11 News, that is my front yard. So that is courtesy of Channel 11, but I don't know why I have to give them credit because that's my damn front yard. And that is the other side of that. So
God.
that is the front of my property.
Oh,
Oh, that's
Lord.
the other side of the tree. Yeah. So that's what I've been dealing with this week. And the guys were just like, "We'll wait for you." And I still don't have any internet. So if I lag you guys, I apologize. But
Well,
yeah.
we are very glad that you and yours are okay, and that everything came out okay, and that nobody was hurt in the Jacksboro tornado. So
Yes,
Yeah,
we
we
did.
just-
I will say
absolutely.
that we did not lose anyone. There were no lives lost. And so while we have damage and a lot of the town has damage, um, we're not having to go to funerals on top of that. So we are, I know it sounds crazy to say, we are extremely fortunate.
Well, that's very good.
Extremely.
absolutely.
So,
So
there's the
let's,
catch up. Let's talk about Mothman.
Let's talk about Mothman.
harbingers. Harbingers of
We're just glad you're
weird
okay.
things to come. Is Ryan
Take it away.
frozen?
I think Ryan is frozen. Ryan,
But
are you
he's
there?
frozen in such a wild look. Look at his eyes. He looks all kinds of crazy.
I'm like, can he hear us? Uh-oh.
Ryan, blink once if you can hear us. Ryan, blink twice if you can hear us.
The state of Texas is still having technical difficulties, and apparently this is going to happen.
Yeah,
over-
Ryan looks scary. I thought for first he was just making a face like, "Shut up, I got to get on with my story." Now I realize he's frozen. Now I feel like an ass.
Well, this he's the lead this week, guys.
I know. I can tell y'all a tornado story.
Oh wait, here he comes. Oh,
I don't
we got-
know.
we got
Wait,
two.
we got double Ryans. Ryan, you're twins on the air.
Oh
with
my
us.
God.
Look at your face.
Oh, there he goes.
Doppelganger.
Talking about harbingers of evil, harbingers
Yeah.
of things that foretell bad things to come.
Man, I mean, I have not had now this is the God's honest truth. I have not had any problem with my internet, us doing this show since we did Yorktown. I have not had any problems with my internet. And I don't know why of all nights tonight,
Little crazy.
I'm having problems with my internet.
And Ryan, 1 year ago, yesterday, we were at the Mothman Museum in West Virginia.
We were. And tonight's topic is the Mothman. And it is my baby. I love the Mothman. That is my favorite cryptid. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you can see, but I'm wearing my Mothman
Your creature
Flatwoods
feature
Monster
shirt.
I'm like,
Yes.
hey, that's not that kind of show. Be careful.
Yeah, no more crotch shots. You already did
I
that on
mean,
Patreon.
it can be if somebody wants to pay enough, but but yeah. So I've actually bought this shirt at the Mothman Museum. There are a lot of really cool shirts like this. They're like the creature feature and like creep night stuff, like mashups with the cryptids and everything. It's really cool. But I digress because Mothman is my favorite, and y'all get ready to strap in because this is a wild ride. This has got everything from UFOs to Men in Black to poltergeists to creatures from another dimension. Wherever the hell Mothman comes from, I don't know. Who knows? But
Oh no.
Oh, no.
to get started is just to kind of y'all remember we did kind of not necessarily a part one because they kind of go hand in hand, but we did a show on here. Am I still here? I'm sorry. Okay. So now, like, if you remember a while back, we did a show on Injured Cold. Was like, I think that was the second or third episode in the podcast that we. Oh, no, actually, probably the third because I think. Anyway, And that was kind of what damn it. That's kind of what kicked off this whole thing with Mothman. Am I cutting out really bad again?
Pretty bad.
Go out
Can
and
y'all
come
even
back
hear
in,
me?
Ryan.
Hang on a second.
Guys, we're so sorry. We're trying.
And I'm the one with the tornado damage. That motherfucker can't get his internet to work. Really?
I know.
I'm giving him a hard time. We
well,
all have
you know
had
what?
these technical difficulties. Sorry.
Yeah, you know what? Perfect time to do a little small announcement. But anyways, so back by popular demand, we will be going back to the Longview Museum if y'all have not heard. So be on the lookout for tickets to go on sale for that. Those should be live no later than mid-April.
And we will only sell how many tickets?
We're only going to cap it at 15 this time. That's
15.
it.
So we actually took the number down.
Yep.
Because that seemed to be the perfect number in there.
Absolutely, sure did. And,
After 15, we got no more friends.
Yep. And if you went with us the first time, when you come back with us this time, or if you come back with us this time, we're going to have quite a few new toys to play with. Everything from a thermal camera to an SLS camera to
a Boo Bear and a Boo Buddy. This that itty bitty bear.
Yes.
For the love of Christ, I hope this works this time. Jesus. Okay. What you guys are talking?
Oh my God.
Our new toys we got.
Yeah, we were.
Yes.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my freaking God.
Are we gonna have to? Mothman's gonna be a challenge.
I apologize.
We haven't had this kind
seems
of
like it's
technical
gonna be a
difficulty
challenge.
since Yorktown.
No.
Yeah.
No, we have not. I don't understand what is going on. I apologize. I'm guessing maybe because of the weather down here.
You can't help that. Go ahead, roll with it. You're coming in pretty good right now.
Okay. For the time.
The second he goes to talk about it.
Hey, y'all froze up.
No, you froze up.
No, you froze up.
Oh, for love of Christ. Y'all, it might just not be in the cards tonight. I don't know what is going on. I'm going to try. And we'll get going. So anyway, if y'all have listened to the podcast before, y'all know we did an episode on Injured Cold back in towards the very beginning. And Injured Cold and Mothman kind of go hand in hand. Motherfucker. So,
talk because you're clear now.
oh my Lord.
Talk fast.
Okay. All right. So like I said, Injured Cold and the Mothman kind of go hand in hand. And he shows up in the beginning of November 1966, and the Mothman shows up shortly thereafter. Now, people always talk about the Mothman. When they talk about the Mothman, they talk about the first encounter being the Scarberry and Millette encounter, the most famous one, which we'll get to here in a little bit. But in my research, for one of my main sources, I used the Mothman Prophecies by John Keel and read through that book. Now, if y'all get a chance to get your hands on this book, check it out, because it is what I'm talking about. It gets way deeper. Oh my God, am I cutting out again?
Just keep going. Or don't. That's totally cool. Whatever.
I got a feeling we ain't never going to hear the end of this story.
I don't
talk
okay,
about
y'all
something else
froze now.
tonight.
Yeah. I think that we might need to switch up some topics. Do we got anything that we could talk about off the top of our heads?
I tell you what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna restart my phone and see if that works. I'll be right back.
Okay. We will talk about back to ticket sales.
There you go. Back
So
to
anyways,
ticket sales.
what we were talking about, y'all, we apologize. I mean, Texas is, I guess the whole state of Texas is just dealing with stuff week after week after week. I mean, we had the tornadoes come through last week. That's why we weren't on last week dealing with that. And then on top now, we have another round of storms that are making their way across Texas tonight and into the morning. And they're supposed to be severe as they get on the east side of East Texas. So, but they have really high, powerful winds coming with them. So in case you're wondering why Ryan keeps cutting out, that is exactly why he keeps cutting out. So Shelly, I'm never
I
gonna
hate
mention
wind.
I'm never gonna mention wind around you again. But anyway,
Unless you can top EF3, don't you ever bitch about your wind to
Very
me,
true.
okay?
Very true. But what we were talking about is that if you're going to join us again in Longview, we're going to have a whole new slew of toys to be able to play with. Thermal camera, SLS camera, Boo Bear, Boo Buddy
The
Junior.
Boo Buddy.
Sure, Boo Buddy. I don't. Yeah. Should we have our Ovulus by then? We have ordered an Ovulus. We'll put that out there.
Middle of April is when they said that I should get it. Damn, you know what? I forgot. I forgot I even ordered that. There's been a tornado, okay, since last time I ordered that. I will have to check. We should. It said it's supposed to ship mid-April, and we're doing the Longview June
11th.
11th.
June
You know
11th.
me and dates. Don't give
I
me
know.
a date because I'll tell everybody the wrong date. That's why if it's a date, I'll just look to you and go, "Hey, what do you got?"
Well, and the reason why we got all this extra equipment is because, y'all, this location, if you haven't been or you haven't watched anything that we've done on it or whatnot, it really is an untapped location. I am born and raised in Longview, Texas. I have known about this location my entire life as a museum. But whenever we got the call to say, hey, you need to call the director over there, something's going on. And we went in the very first night within, what would you say, Shelly, 6 hours of being there, we probably have received our most profound piece of evidence that we ever have received. Collectively. Yes, collectively. And that was paranormal poltergeist activity on command of closing a door. We asked it to close the door, and immediately it closed the door.
And Chad, I got to tell you, I was scared because I sit there on the floor watching an Estes method, and this door goes behind me, and I was like, I did not touch that door, and I turned around like, who in the hell is behind me?
Actually, your exact words were, this door is opening. This door is opening. This fucking door is opening. Anyways, we got Ryan back. So Ryan.
Oh wait, what are we talking about?
We were talking about the Longview again.
Okay, because clearly, fucking Mothman is not working.
I know, right? Continue though. You're coming in nice and clear right now.
Here's what when we last joined Ryan, he was telling us about John Keel and the Mothman prophecies and how we should get our hand on this book. Please join us now to your program currently in progress.
Oh, Jesus Christ. All right, here we go. So hopefully this time it stays connected. I think this time I might have a bit of a better connection. Let's see if this holds. So anyway, if you guys get a chance, get your hands on the Mothman prophecies. It's a fantastic book. It gets into a lot more deeper detail than I'm going to get into tonight that kind of really makes you think about the paranormal and the way things work, which we'll kind of talk a little bit about, but it gets real deep. And he actually has a few more works to get even deeper into the paranormal and will make you really think about exactly how the paranormal works and what goes hand in hand with the paranormal. It's super interesting. But anyway, so we talk about a lot of the times the first Mothman encounter with the Millettes, with the Scarberries and the Millettes, that usually kicks off anything you ever read about the Mothman. However, Mothman is actually sighted before the Millettes and the Scarberries see him. So the first recorded sighting of Mothman that I could find was on November the 14th, 1967. A man named Newell Partridge was sitting at his home. Now, Newell Partridge was described as a towering man. He was somebody who was not easily shaken. He's one of these hard scrabble, like Appalachian farmers. Like this dude lives off the land. He's a good dude, but he's just not someone that suffers bullshit lightly, basically. I mean, he's a very honest person. And at about 10:30 that night, he's sitting in his house and his TV goes out. And all of a sudden, the TV starts making a metallic whining noise. And he said that the TV went up to a really high-pitched sound, and then it started sliding up and down the musical scale, making these different tones and these different sounds. And he was just like, what the hell is happening? Well, at the same time, his dog named Bandit, who was a rather large German Shepherd, begins wailing outside on the porch. And so he gets up to go investigate. He's like, what the hell's my dog barking at? Why is my TV going out? What the fuck is going on around here? So he gets up and he goes outside. And as he gets up to investigate, he picks up a flashlight and he walks out onto the porch, sees Bandit, and Bandit's sitting there howling at something in the yard, and he doesn't know what it is. He swings his flashlight around into the yard, and about 150 yards away from him in the darkness, he sees the outline of some sort of animal he's never seen before. But the thing that sticks out to him are these two giant red eyes, burning, glowing red eyes just in his yard. And what he said is they reminded him of bicycle reflectors. Now, as his flashlight passes over whatever this is, he's sitting there looking at it. Now, this man is an experienced hunter. He has lived in these woods his entire life. He has hunted everything from coons to squirrels to deer. He's seen just about everything there is in the woods. And to him, to his recollection, he's never seen anything that looks like this. And neither has Bandit. And Bandit snarls and takes off towards this animal or whatever he is that he has in the flashlight.
Not Bandit.
Yeah.
Bandit be fine.
No, he won't.
Oh, crap.
So
thanks, Shelly.
I've been trying to keep a positive attitude.
So Bandit takes off, snarls, and runs towards this thing. Now, Noel normally would follow his dog and see what his dog was going after. I mean, because, there's something on his land, and his dog went after it. That's like his faithful companion. That's like his dog he's had forever. And he cares about this thing. But he says he all of a sudden got an inexplicable wave of fear that came over him. And it sent a chill down his spine to the point where he turns tail and runs inside, loads a shotgun, and sleeps with a loaded shotgun by his bed the rest of the night. And
he didn't think he needed to go try to find his dog?
Oh,
nope.
Yeah.
No, he said he was too scared. He said that normally he would have, but he was just so unexplicably freaked the hell out that he just had to go into the house. And so he goes to sleep that night.
I don't like this guy.
What little bit of sleep he could get. And he gets up the next morning and he goes outside and he goes looking for Bandit. Bandit is nowhere to be found. The only trace of Bandit that he finds is he finds tracks leading up to where he saw the eyes in his yard. And he sees tracks running around in a circle like the dog was chasing its tail. Then the tracks stop. And Bandit was never seen again.
Bandit got.
Bandit got. So Mothman ate Bandit or took Bandit somewhere. I don't know what happened to Bandit.
Usually whenever you see a dog running in a circle, it's usually because they feel like they have something treed and they're circling you, especially a hunting dog. If they have something treed, they'll circle the tree. Mm. Do you think he thought old Mothman was a tree and he was running around him like, burr, burr, burr,
I don't know. I think he didn't know what to do. I think that, he was probably protecting his master and protecting his home. And whatever was there was too much for him, and if this is, how big German Shepherds can get.
Oh, yeah.
If this is a big ass German Shepherd, whatever it took him had to be sizable.
Poor Bandit.
So,
I mean, I only have to
be pretty strong.
I mean, I only have to worry about like hawks, for Gabby. Mm-hmm. I mean, for those who don't know, I have a 4.5 pound miniature Pomeranian. I have to be careful of like fucking hawks while she's using the bathroom. Yeah. Anyways, go ahead.
Oh man, have you ever had one like swoop down at her?
We've had an owl.
Oh no.
Yeah.
We had to fight off an owl.
Like,
oh no.
Should have seen me and been like, no, stop it.
I just get like an image in my head of you like chasing an owl with a broom around the yard, smacking it, getting away from your dog.
You know what, Ryan? I went the same way. I was like, Blake with a broom. That's exactly where I went to with a broom.
Hey, listen, she might be 4.5 pounds and she might work my nerves in a diva half the damn time, but don't fuck with my dog.
So yeah, poor Bandit's never seen again. Now, there was a report of someone seeing like a dead dog in the road at one point. I think the Millettes and the Scarberries did at one point when they were driving back to Point Pleasant. But we don't know if that was Bandit or not, because when they went back out there, the dog was gone. So maybe Mothman's like hiding dogs somewhere to eat them. Who knows? But the next night is when the most famous Mothman encounter happens, when the Scarberries and the Millettes see the Mothman. Now, they see the Mothman in an area called the TNT area. And for people who aren't familiar with Point Pleasant, there is about 7 miles outside of town, and now it's a nature preserve. I think it's called the McClintock Wildlife Station, and it's about 2,500 acres, and it's out 7 miles away from town, deep in the woods. But back in World War II, it was a munitions plant, and they used it to manufacture all kinds of munitions and all kinds of like just what I said, like TNT. And on this landscape back then, not so much anymore. I think they demolished it. Was like some of the old like actual plants that were out there where they made the stuff. But what still exists out there, and what existed out there then, were these igloos, these concrete igloos, where they stored all these munitions and everything out there. And the landscape is dotted with over 100 concrete igloos, and it's full of dirt roads, and there's all kinds of areas to hide back in there. And it's, it's an ideal like Lover's Lane too, because a bunch of kids would drive out there and they would do what kids do in a town where there ain't nothing to do. They go out there and they'd make out and everything like that. So what more of a perfect place than to encounter the Mothman? Because, every urban legend, Lover's Lane, all of a sudden some sort of horrific thing.
Yeah, here's the thing. If you make it out in a public place on something called Lover's Lane, you're going to get got. Just go to the Sonic. You don't ever hear about two people making out at the Sonic and getting shot.
Cryptids, serial killers, something.
Absolutely.
Yeah, make out at the Sonic.
Yeah.
But this time,
I encourage that.
Sonic doesn't, though. I don't think they like that too much.
I don't think Sonic does.
Hey,
but
you
Shelley
know what?
does.
Sonic can tell them whatever they want once they get there. I'm just saying, might be fun.
You can't do that with our onion rings.
I said make out. I didn't say get naked. I said make out. I didn't say do anything nasty. I picture making out as kissing and necking and stuff.
Well, this is actually the one time where it was warranted. You didn't want to be out there on Lover's Lane, and what happens is at about 11:30 p.m. on November the 15th, 1966, John and Linda Scarberry and Steve and Mary Millette, they're a couple of married couples, but they're only about 18, 19 years old. They're still teenagers. They want to go out there, and they're riding the back roads out there in John's 57 Chevy. And so this thing is fast and this thing is loud. And they're out there kind of looking for people who are out there necking, and they have like a flashlight so they can spotlight people and mess with them while they're necking. They're also looking for friends because, they know people hang out there. So they're driving around all these little dirt roads and everything out there. And so they round one of the igloos and they come up on the old generator plant. Linda, sitting in the front seat, suddenly screams at the top of her lungs, and everyone turns to look to see what she saw. And they see in the darkness two big, bright red circles, flaming red eyes, about 2 inches in diameter and about 6 inches apart. And they are attached to an animal that is about 6 feet tall. And Linda said, quote, "It was the eyes that got us. They were like automobile reflectors." And they said whatever this thing was, it was grayish in color and walked on two sturdy hind legs and slowly began to shuffle towards the car, almost like it didn't know how to walk. And so John Scarberry, he just hits the gas. Like
Smart
he's like,
man.
He's like, I am out of here. He hits the gas and he's like, I am gone. I'm not sticking around to see whatever this is. So he blasts through. There's a gate at the end of the road. He blasts through this gate, and as they pass this thing, it's kind of standing on like a little hill by the highway. And as he goes past this thing spreads its wings and flies up into the sky as they passed it.
Oh shit.
So the Millettes are sitting in the back seat, and they're looking out the back seat, and they scream, "My God, it's following us." And this thing, they said, followed them down these back roads. They're riding down these back roads. They're hitting these turns. They're hitting these swerves. They're going everywhere. And they are reaching speeds in excess of 100 miles per hour, but yet the Mothman is able to keep up with them. And the couple said it never flapped its wings. It almost like it glided, and it kept swooping down at the tops of their car, and like scratched the roof on their car.
They didn't have no shotgun with them?
I guess not. I guess not.
I'd at least
It's like
that made him back up. That usually works.
It's like some damn Jeepers Creepers bullshit right here.
Right?
Damn.
Isn't it? And then they said not only was it doing that, it was also squeaking like it was a big mouse. as it was coming after them. They heard it like making squeaking noises.
Wait, so they hear the
sorry.
scratching of the tin and they see the big thing and the big red eyes and what?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
That's where I'm at. That's all I'm hearing in my head.
What?
I'm sorry. It's Roger Scarberry. I'm sorry. I said John for some reason, but it's Roger Scarberry. So anyway, like he's driving and this thing is squeaking at him and swooping at him and everything else and chases him. Like the bat from Scooby-Doo.
Oh my God.
And chases them all the way till they get to the edge of the town. And this thing just like veers off into a cornfield or into a field and stops following them. So they are utterly and completely freaked the hell out. And they go straight to the police station. And when they go to the police station, there is a deputy named Miller Halstead who's on duty. They go and tell him what the deal is. And Miller Halstead later on says, hey, these were good kids. They were upstanding kids in the community. I had no reason not to believe them. Something clearly freaked them out. So I wanted to go and see exactly what it was that made them so upset. So he agrees to go back out to the TNT area with the kids to search and see if they find something out there because they're telling him the story and he just firmly wants to find something to validate them because they are just absolutely hysterical.
Was this before or after he gave him the field sobriety test? Because you walk in right now to any police station, say you saw something squeaking like a mouse and swooping through the air with great big eyes, and they're going to say, can you please step over here? Can you please do this? And then do this. And then, yeah. So he believes him and he no field sobriety test, huh?
No field sobriety test.
Okay.
He just ends up going back out there with him to see if he could find something. So he follows him back out there to the TNT area. They look around for a long time and they don't find anything. However, one weird thing does happen. He goes to turn on his police radio. And when he does, a loud, strange signal comes out of it. And he said it sounded like a tape being played at very high speed. And he has
a tape. Are you talking like a cassette tape?
Like a cassette tape, like like something like being. Okay. He said that's what he sounded. He said it sounded like it was being played at high speed, and it was a weird tone. And he's worked with police radios his entire life. He's been a policeman forever, and he had not before then nor since then ever heard any sound like that come out of his police radio. So that kind of freaks him out a little bit, but he just kind of remains stone faced and is like, "Hey, there's nothing out here. I believe you, but we can't find anything, so just go on home." So that was their encounter. Now, I do remember when we were in the Mothman Museum. The Mothman Museum had the actual signed, like the written and signed affidavits from all these people who saw this. And if I'm not mistaken, it was Linda Scarberry who continued to have, she would close her eyes and she would see this thing. And it would like haunt her for a long time.
Traumatized her.
It traumatized her. And if I remember correctly, what she said was, I go to church every Sunday and I have seen this thing and clearly it has affected my life and no one from the church has come out to talk to me about it or anything like that. And she just doesn't understand. So imagine seeing something that you can't explain and not only seeing that, something that has absolutely terrified you, but also have a crisis of faith at the same time. Because everything that you have just seen, according to everything you've been taught, should not exist. Or what you have seen is something you shouldn't have seen, and it's not a good thing to see.
Yeah.
So she's having an absolute crisis of faith. So they go through a lot. And this is not the last time we'll check in on them in this story because there's a lot that happens to them as time goes on. So the next day, on November the 16th, 1966, Mr. and Mrs. Raymond Walmsley, their friend Marcella Bennett, and her baby daughter Tina all decide to go visit their friend who happens to live on the other side of the TNT area. So they have to drive around the TNT area to get to their friend's house. As they're driving out there, they look over the plant and they notice a red light in the sky over the TNT plant. Now, it's just hovering there. And this is 1966. They don't have the technology for something to just be hovering. It's just sitting there, and they can't figure out what it is. So they pull over for a minute. They kind of look at it. And like, well, we can't explain it. Whatever. So they decide to keep on and go about their way to go to their friend's house. So they get to their friend's house, and they find that their friends were not home, but their friend's children was at home. And they speak to the kids for a little bit, and they decide they're going to go back home because their friends aren't there. You know, you can only talk to kids for so long. And they go walking back towards the car. And as they walk back towards the car, they said that all of a sudden this big hulking figure rose up from behind the car, like almost like something was laying down on the ground and like waiting on them to walk back towards the car. And as it stands up, they described it as big and gray with glowing red eyes. And Mrs. Bennett is so terrified that she drops her daughter, Tina, on the ground and is just like transfixed on this thing. And she's just like staring at this thing. And it's almost like she couldn't move. Like she was almost hypnotized. Like she just could not break gaze with this thing. And she was staring directly at its eyes. So the wings on this creature, again, begin to unfold. About a 6-foot wingspan on either side. And Raymond Walmsley, acting quickly, grabs Miss Bennett, kind of shakes her out of her trance, grabs her daughter, and they run up the stairs, run into this house, and they bolt and lock the door. And as they're sitting there in this house, they're looking out the window. And Mothman comes walking up onto the steps of the house and onto the porch. And they have a big window. And he just kind of leans his head in and peeks inside the house. And all they could see are these blazing red eyes outside, you know, being garnished by this hulking figure looking into the house. And the women and children go into hysterics. They are scared shitless. They're crying, they're screaming. And Raymond has the wherewithal to call the cops. He's like, I'm going to call the cops. I'm going to see if they can't come out here and figure out what the hell this is. So he calls the cops. And of course, by the time the cops get there, Mothman has disappeared.
This sounds like a jacked up game of peekaboo. Some bitch
So
coming
damn
up from
true.
behind the car and then all up the up in in the window. Yeah, no, back up.
But you know, like, and this is something we'll continue to find as we go along. A lot of people seem to be transfixed on this thing when they see it, and B, they are overcome with an immense amount of fear that they can't explain. Just like almost like a primal fear that, you know, they know something isn't right, and they know that it is horrifying and scary, but it's something they kind of can't explain. You know, almost like, you know, have you ever heard people talk about like your lizard brain? You know, where like you have like things that are embedded in you, just like that aren't necessarily, you know, what you're taught, but like your natural body reactions to things like that.
Your instinct.
Yeah, your instinct, you know, and so many people, like, I think that like flares up and their hair stands on end, but they just can't seem to break gaze with this thing. And they just get so overwhelmed by fear and they act irrationally because, you know, the guy would have went after his dog normally. The woman would not have dropped her daughter and she would have picked her daughter up normally, you know? So these people are seeing this thing and it's just flipping on that weird part of yourself, you know?
That id. Yeah.
That exactly.
Id, your id.
Well, this happens again. But this happens, things are quiet for a few days. But on November the 20th, 1966, there's an elderly man who is at his home, and his dog starts barking outside.
Not another dog.
He goes outside to see why. And as he walks out his front door and looks, standing in his front yard is a 6 to 7 foot tall gray being with wings and flaming red eyes. And he, once again, somebody who was just transfixed on this thing, watches this thing and locked eyes with the creature and was unable to move for several minutes until the creature decided to fly off. The creature flies off. He kind of shakes out of it and walks back into the house. And his wife said that he was so pale and so shaken that she thought he was having a heart attack. And he just tells her what he saw. And they just kind of chalk it up to, hey, this is whatever's in the area. And he just becomes another story of Mothman being crazy and lurking around and showing up in people's yards and shit.
But what happened to the dog?
The dog was fine. Like the dog was barking. So Mothman didn't eat this dog. He ate the other one, but he didn't eat this one.
I'm like over here, like, I don't give a shit about the old man. What happened to the dog?
You know, because you're saying, and you know, having just gone through a traumatic event, there are some people that truly do freeze in that moment of crisis. And there are some people that are completely fine. I wonder if it just happened that all three of these people were freezers, Just
I don't
people
know.
that when something happened, their instinct basically shuts down, and
Mhm.
they become paralyzed, because that actually is a part of survival instinct. Like
Oh
rabbits, if
yeah.
they feel like they're in danger, they get completely still, because no
Mhm.
movement
Absolutely.
attracts no predators. So I'm wondering if they were people that froze or acted, or if that made the difference in who saw the Mothman, because it seems like the people that have see him all have this freeze reaction.
That's a really good point I hadn't thought about. That is a really good point because, well, I mean, well, then again, too, though, you had the Millettes and you had the Scarberries, and you're going to have someone here soon, a couple people who see this thing and they hit the gas and get the hell out of Dodge.
Okay, so okay, all right. So that kind of disproves my theory. I was just thinking some people
Mhm.
freeze and some people actually react and are good in the crisis moments.
But
So I was just wondering if that
it
had
does.
any effect.
I was going to say, it does seem like, though, that anyone who's not in a car that sees this seems to be people who freeze, but people
Because
who are
your
in a
first
vehicle.
instinct should be to run away.
Exactly.
Should be to sense the danger and to run away. But it seems
Mhm.
like anyone that sees him, except for did you say Randolph, who grabbed the lady and then grabbed her baby, Tina? Raymond, excuse me.
Mhm.
And that, he had to actually shake the lady after she actually dropped her child.
Mhm.
That goes against every motherly instinct you can ever think of. Your
Mhm.
first thing should be to and protect your baby. And she went,
Mhm. Yeah, and drop
and
it.
yeah.
So,
So I wonder if that made a difference as to who saw it. Like, could this animal sense something? Sorry, you guys, I cannot get comfortable. I've got so many ant bites on my leg.
You're okay.
Yeah, I just wondered. I didn't know if there was
I don't
something
know. I mean,
similar in all of these, because I'm starting to see
yeah.
a thread
thread,
that's of
yeah.
similarities run
Mhm.
through here.
I mean,
Go
and
ahead.
that is something to think about. That is something interesting I didn't even think about before you brought that up. But this is the next encounter actually happens during the daytime, and it happens at about 7:15 a.m. on November the 25th, 1966. A salesman named Thomas Urey is driving on Route 62 just north of the old TNT plant. He's driving around and he notices on the side of the road a tall gray humanoid standing in a field. As he approaches, it spreads its wings, and he said it had about a 10-foot wingspan. Again, everyone's describing this 10-foot wingspan. And he said it took off straight up into the air, and it flew over Yuri's convertible and circled it several times in the air as he's driving past it. And then it swooped down over his convertible, and he steps on the gas to try to get the hell out of Dodge. And he drives about 75 miles per hour. And he said that the Mothman kept up with him too and began to swoop down at his car and chase him. And it also runs off into a field or flies off into a field before he gets to town.
It's time to burn that field down.
And he says, like everyone else, he said he was gripped with a terrible sense of fear, and not a normal fear, a fear that something just wasn't right. I mean, it's like, well, no shit, you just got chased by a damn winged demon. Flying.
One comment that was actually just put up, I'll give a shout out to Jenny for it, that she said that maybe the Mothman can only put one person in a free state, kind of like, I'm guessing kind of like a hypnosis state.
Ooh.
I mean, if you're
that's interesting.
If this
Good
is the
theory, Jenny.
if this right here is what is being,
they all say they looked at They all say they looked into his eyes.
And if he can only do it one at a time, then that would explain why the other gentleman was able to grab her daughter and pull them to safety. So
that is a very good
theory, Jenny.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's a very good point. Yeah.
Because
it just makes sense because everyone else around this is able to react accordingly, but the one person just seems to be stuck.
That's looking into its eyes is stuck because they all first thing they describe is the eyes.
Is the eyes.
Oh, good job, Jenny. Thank you for watching. You just made my night.
Absolutely. That was a good point. Yeah.
And that's why we love you guys commenting, because you guys give us perspectives that we don't necessarily come up with, and just thank you. That was a very good one. You
make sense of our stupidity.
Now, while this is going on, this is kind of the week after the Millettes and the Scarberries have seen Mothman. So the trouble is not over for the Scarberries. As soon as they see the Mothman, for about a week afterwards, they were awoken late at night by weird sounds coming from around their trailer. They said they heard beeps and loud garbled noises. that sounded like a sped up record and like just loud sounds. And they were looking all around their trailer and they could not find a source for it. And it happened every night, late at night. And it was so bad that they moved back in with they moved back in with Linda's mother. They got the hell out of their trailer because it scared them so bad. And so they moved back in with her mother. And, you know, that's another thing that is going hand in hand. And you'll see as we go along too, a lot of people start to hear like all these weird garbled noises. They get phone calls in the middle of the night. And their TVs, like a lot of electronics, just start going haywire around people who have seen the Mothman or have encountered these things that are going on in Point Pleasant. So we'll kind of get to that a little bit later. But the next sighting of the Mothman also happens in the daytime. And there was a woman named Connie Carpenter who was driving home from church on November the 27th at 10:30 a.m. She's driving home and she passes the Mason County Golf Course in New Haven, West Virginia. She sees a giant man-like figure standing on the side of the road. She says about 6 to 7 feet tall. And as she approaches, she notices the large glowing red eyes as she gets closer. And she said she felt almost hypnotized by them to the point where she was transfixed and almost crashed her car.
Again.
There's your point right there. Yeah.
I think
So wait,
Jimmy's spot on.
So Ryan, we're talking, this is what, sighting number 5?
4 or 5. Yeah.
Sighting, I think it's number 5. Sighting number 5 in a short, because I know you keep throwing out dates, but we're only talking about just in a couple of weeks' time, right?
Yeah, a couple of weeks' time, exactly.
Okay. I just wanted
So
to kind
he
of make
suddenly
sure.
he showed up and running amok.
Yeah, all over the place. I mean, he's being sighted, by the TNT plant. He's being sighted by the golf course. He's out in the woods scaring the crap out of people. So when she says she slows her car with her eyes transfixed on it, as she slows down, it spread its wings and rose up into the sky like a helicopter, is the way she described it, like levitating. It doesn't flap its wings, but it just kind of rises up and then has a wingspan of 10 feet, like every other sighting, and just swoops at her car. And she hits the gas and gets the hell out of there. It chases her, but she gets away from it.
I wonder if he found the cars to be a threat. Because it doesn't really seem like he does anything to the people, but every time there's a car involved, he goes after it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and this is something that you're going to see later on too. Like even some of the more modern sightings, he continues to swoop down at cars, and I don't know. I mean, maybe what were you going to say, Blake? I'm sorry.
No, I was just I was just going to ask. At this time, do you know if there were any? Had this been made public yet? Like, was it a big breaking story? Were people getting
Could this
details
be mass
from?
Hysteria?
Yeah, that kind of. That's what my first thought is.
So, because these are being reported. There's actually a woman who becomes John Keel's investigative partner. Her name is Mary Heyer. She works at a newspaper across the river from Point Pleasant called The Messenger, and she is like, posting, she's putting all these articles in the paper about all these different sightings. And as a matter of fact, this is what catches John Keel's attention. And John Keel is a UFO researcher, and he's the guy who literally writes the book on Mothman, and he comes to town here shortly. But what I was going to say about Connie is after her encounter, Connie wakes up the next day and she immediately comes down with what's called Klieg's conjunctivitis. Do you guys know what that is? Have you guys ever heard of that before?
It's a form of really bad kind of pink eye, isn't it?
It is, but it's not from any sort of viral anything. It's from people who basically stare at UV light for too long. And it's also commonly referred to as eye burn. And like I said, it's from exposure to intense UV rays. And it's actually common in many UFO encounters. But she didn't see a UFO.
Really?
She just saw Mothman.
Saw his eyes, though.
I almost wonder if his eyes aren't emitting UV rays. So, and this is also something that you're going to see as we go along. A lot of people who encounter this sort of thing come down with that Klieg's conjunctivitis. And, there's no like heavy light source out there that she was going to, unless she's standing out in a field looking at the sun for hours, there's nothing there's no way that she could have come down with that without seeing whatever she saw. And it's just weird that it kind of went hand in hand with that. So Keel hears all these reports And John Keel is, like I said, he's a UFO researcher, and he writes all these articles for different magazines. He's written articles for Fate magazine. He's written articles for all these UFO magazines. He investigates UFOs and paranormal activity. He's like a forerunner for like what we do. You know, he's almost like a Hans Holzer, or he's like a, you know, but he's like more so on the UFO and cryptid side than the ghost side. And he's intrigued by all this, and he decides he has to go to Point Pleasant to see what's happening. So he arrives in Point Pleasant on December the 7th, 1966. He goes straight to the Mason County Courthouse, and he finds Deputy Halstead, asks him about his encounter and what happened when he went back out to the TNT factory. And he asks them where he can find the Scarberries, the Millettes, and everybody who has seen what they have seen. So Halstead gives him the address of Linda's mom, and her name is Mrs. McDaniel. And he goes out to Mrs. McDaniel's house, knocks on the door, introduces himself, and he's like, "Hey, I'm here. I want to talk to your daughter and her husband, and I want to talk to their friends and everything." And she's like, "Oh, okay, cool. Come on in. I'll call them and see if they can't come over here." So he goes in. The Scarberries, the Millettes, and Connie Carpenter show up. He interviews them, and Mary Hire, this is the first time they meet. Mary Hire shows up, and she is, like I said, she's going to be the person who's going to be like his investigative partner, because he is kind of back and forth between Point Pleasant a lot. He's kind of all over the place investigating other things, and he comes back periodically to investigate.
So she's his evidence collector, basically.
Yeah. So she's pretty much like the person who's like boots on the ground in the area, and then he'll come back and go with her and investigate things. So he introduces himself, and like I said, he interviews these people and gets all this information, and they tell him their story. And so he's like, "Well, would you all be willing to go back out to the TNT factory? I want to go see this place for myself." And they're like, "Sure." So the whole group climbs into a car, and they all drive out to the TNT area. And they are out there riding around, and they drive up to the old ammo dump building. And he decides he wants to go in. And he's like, "Hey, does anybody want to come with me?" And so Connie and her fiance raise their hand, and they're like, "Sure, we'll go with you." And everyone else is like, "No, we'll stay out here. Nope. Y'all have fun. Y'all go."
Yeah, the smart ones stayed in the car. They can get away.
Yeah. I can handle the spirits. Big, some man-sized red-eye wing creature. Oh, no. I'm
not without a shotgun.
I'm good. Yeah,
I'm guessing they didn't take one with them. Prepared.
No, probably not.
But, you know, I mean, man, John Keel, and as you'll find, is a true paranormal investigator. Like, this dude, I want to see it. Take me to it. You can come with me or not. I'm doing it anyway. This guy is one of my favorite people. This guy's awesome. So they go into this building, and Connie is kind of jovial and joking a little bit, just like making light of the situation and everything. And they don't find much, but as they start for the door, Connie starts screaming bloody murder.
Fucking
like
Connie.
She starts freaking out and starts crying uncontrollably and goes into hysterics. And she starts repeating, "Those eyes, he's there. I saw those two big red eyes in the back." And Keel is like swinging his flashlight around like, "I don't see what you're talking about," you know, and he's looking around, and he searches the whole building and doesn't find anything, but she is breaking down in hysterics. And so he's like, "Well, you know, we should probably get her out of this building." So they go outside, and they see that the group that was standing outside has gathered at the edge of the field that is behind the power plant, and they're looking into the field. And so he walks up, and he's like, "Hey, what's going on?" They were like, "Well, we thought we saw a tall figure run behind the plant. Was that you?" He was like, "No, all three of us were inside of the plant." And they said they had also heard a loud metal clang, and had he heard anything? And he goes, "No, I didn't hear anything. I was inside, and I think I would have heard it." And as they're like discussing this, Mary Millette speaks up, and she's like, "Hey, my ear's bleeding." And so Keel like shines the flashlight at Mary Millette and sees there is blood trickling out of her ear. And he's like, "Why, you know, what is going on? Why is like your ear bleeding?" And he notices when he goes out here to where these people are, like the feeling in the air, like the atmosphere has almost changed as well. And he says that the group began to feel that something wasn't right. And Mary Hire speaks up and says, "Yeah, it's almost oppressive and heavy feeling out here." And so they decide they're going to leave. And he postulates that the reason her ear may have started bleeding was because the atmosphere had changed outside. Maybe the air pressure had changed, and that's why everyone else heard that loud metal clang and he didn't. And that maybe that's why her ear started bleeding.
Do you think her eardrum broke?
I don't know. Like,
I mean, that'd be the only explanation for
Her
a
ear
change
bleeding.
a change in
Yeah.
atmosphere like that causing a rupture of your eardrum. But
Mhm.
that's pretty painful from.
Yeah, and
I mean, I've never had it happen, but from what I've heard.
And from what I recall in the book, like he talks about that, and that's what he like thinks, and that's what he says. Maybe that's what happened, but he doesn't really go into much more detail about it. It's just something weird that happens around all this. And he decides, hey, we should probably get these people out of here. They're kind of freaking out. They don't want to be here clearly, so let's get them back to Mrs. McDaniel's house. They get him back to Mrs. McDaniel's house, and this guy, being a true paranormal investigator, decides he's going to go back out to the TNT plant by himself.
Oh, Jesus.
Why
This
by himself? Why y'all was we all know safety in numbers. Always have
Yes.
somebody that can pull you out if you get jumped.
Exactly. But, I think that he was so determined to figure out what was going on and what was terrorizing these people that he just wanted to see if he could find it himself. Now, this is something that I find extremely interesting, and I want to know what you guys think about this when I tell you this story when he goes back out here. So he drives back out to the TNT area alone. And as he drove, he notices he gets to a particular spot that's about 15 feet wide, and all of a sudden he becomes overcome with fear. The hairs on his arm stands up, and he starts freaking out. But once he gets to the other side of the spot, he's fine again. So he takes his car, turns back around, drives back through this spot. Once again, about the 15-foot wide spot, he starts freaking out. And he's like, what the hell is going on here? So he gets out of his car. He parks on the other side of the spot, gets out of his car, walks over to the edge of it, to the edge of right where he knows where it's going to start, stands on it, feels fine, takes one more step into the area, and begins freaking out and begins feeling like an immense wave of fear come over him again, walks through that particular spot, walks to the other side of it, and is totally fine. And he cannot explain exactly what is going on and why this is happening. And so he just like, well, I can't explain this. So I'm going to go back to the hotel. I'm going to come back out here tomorrow, and I'm going to see if I feel the same way. Goes back to the hotel, comes back out to the same spot tomorrow, feels completely fine, doesn't feel any fear whatsoever. So what do y'all think that was? Because I can't quite put my finger on it. And if all this crazy shit's going on in this particular area, and there's just this one spot where he begins to feel this, do you think maybe it's just I don't think he had an EMF detector with him or anything like that, Do you think maybe it's just a weird magnetic fluctuation in the earth? Do you think that maybe something is manipulating that in that area? What do y'all think?
And that
Ripping
was
the
my-
time-space continuum. Done. Problem solved.
Y'all think that's what it is for real?
My first go at it was something possibly just being wonky with maybe the Earth's magnetic fields and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That sounds very energy based to me. I mean, we've all
Yeah.
experienced that in locations.
Mhm.
You walk into one spot or one room and the hairs on your arms stand up, back your neck, all that kind of stuff, and you walk out and you're fine, and you go back later on and it doesn't happen. We've all had that happen. So
Absolutely.
I mean, does it mean that that the Mothman was causing it? No, maybe it was something other paranormal, or maybe it was a rip in the continuum. You never know.
Space-time continuum, yeah.
Well, yeah.
Here's the thing. You know what this sounds like to me? That sounds very much like the Skinwalker Ranch, the strange things that they report. That's what it sounds a lot like to me. And it sounds very similar, where they will walk up and have meter spike and things go off the chart reading. They will go back 5 minutes later and there is nothing. But they've had massive spikes in radiation, massive spikes. I mean, people have had, things form on their heads, like sudden masses and cysts and things like that form on them just from being in these areas. So there are things going on underneath the ground that, we aren't smart enough to have figured out yet. It's very possible, I think, that he could have that particular spot maybe open to some energy fluctuation that we as our little human brains, because we're really pea brains. We haven't figured out yet. We haven't figured
Okay.
out how it works or what it does.
Well, the question I have is, do you think whatever that was being caused by all the paranormal activity in the area, or is that what drew all that paranormal activity in that area to that particular spot?
I think that would be the cause, not the result. I think the cause of all the activity would be due to something, vibrations and energy. As an investigator, you pick up on that. Like said, you walk into a room, it feels weird. Your hair on your arm will stand up. Your ears might pop or something. And then you go back in 3 minutes, after you brought it. Oh my God, you guys come down to this room. You walk in, nothing.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right.
I think it would be more the cause of all the activity rather than the effect of something. It's very difficult to affect the earth. The earth is more likely to have an effect on you.
True.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. And, I think it's kind of interesting that it's happening around all of this like crazy ass activity that just decides to show up.
Now, Ryan, when we drove into Point Pleasant, remember how we drove in and we're like, okay, this is weird feeling in this town. And we were looking around, and even like walking up some buildings, we were like, what in the hell is going on down this street? And what Ryan hasn't told you yet is there's actually a little Native American voodoo up in that area too, with Chief Cornstalk.
That's something that I have. So in my research, I found that that's more legend than actual fact here recently. Like people have passed down the legend. So the story goes that there was a Native American chief, and I believe he helped some people during the Revolutionary War. Something happened to where he was captured, and because they killed him and his son, he put a curse on the land, and some people think that maybe that's where the Mothman came from.
Well, for it being just a legend, there is a huge statue erected
to
him
absolutely
in this park. And I was fascinated by it. And it literally has this mural of like him being friendly, then putting him in jail, then like killing him. You're going, okay, this is like your whole history in like, painted form, and it doesn't end well. Why would you paint this?
Oh yeah, because when you go to Point Pleasant and you're right there on the Ohio River, there is like a bunch of giant murals that they have of like the history of the area, and there is a giant Chief Cornstalk, and there's he was there for sure. There's actually Chief Cornstalk hunting grounds that's close to there too, that people had a bunch of weird experiences in.
When Ryan told me Chief Cornstalk, I'm like, you are lying. That is not his damn name. He's like, no, I swear. I said, you're waiting for me to say that so you can go, man, that dumb bitch believe that shit. Continue on with your story.
So Keel goes back to New York, or he goes back to investigate like another flap of UFO encounters and stuff. So he leaves the area for a little bit. And on December the 7th, 1966, about 2 a.m., across the river on the Ohio side, right across from the TNT plant, a guy goes outside to take a leak in the middle of the night. And
classy.
He looks over across the river and he sees a bright object floating over the river, a bright circular object. And he said it had windows like portholes, and they were covered with curtains that looked like aluminum foil. And he sees this and he's like, well, ain't my business, and goes back inside and goes to sleep.
Well, yeah, he's got his winger out. He's got to get that thing tucked away and put up before anybody sees him. He's thinking they're calling the law on him.
And he's just like, nope, not today. And he just goes back in the house. And so about 2 hours later, on the same side of the river, a Mr. and Mrs. Charles Hearn of Cheshire, Ohio, go out of their house to walk their dog in the middle of the night. Dog has to do his business, so he's walking his dog outside. He happens to look towards the river, and he noticed a red light on the opposite bank. And he's like, I've never seen that before. And he's watching this red light, and in the glare, he can see small figures moving around in the glare. Like he makes the outline of like people or humanoid shapes moving around in this red glare. So he calls his wife outside. He's like, hey, honey, come check this out. What the hell's going on?
And she's like, why the hell are you waking me up? Damn, can't you walk the dog by yourself? Damn, I got to do everything.
Well, she walks out there. I can imagine curlers in her hair and a pink nightgown. She walks outside and she looks outside and she looks and sees the same thing he's looking at. And for several minutes, they watch these figures run back and forth in this red glare. And they're like, what in the hell is going on? So they call their neighbor, and their neighbors wake up, and their neighbors come, and watch the same thing. And they're watching, and all of a sudden it starts flashing red and orange as they're watching it. And then the light went out, and then it turned green and flew up into the sky and shot off into the sky, and they never saw it again. So they go to Mary Hyre, and they're like, hey, we saw this thing. This is what we saw. And she prints it in her column in the newspaper. And after she prints this and she prints the other Mothman stories, dozens of people start coming forward with all their stories. So she does this, and then she starts to receive strange visitors. And this is the story of her first strange visitor. Now, she's working late one night in January of 1967. And she's in there, she's writing a column, she's in her office, and this little guy who's about 4 feet 6 inches tall comes in. She said he had dark, deep-set eyes, thick lens glasses, thick soles on his shoes that added about 2 inches to his height, and it was super cold outside, but he was wearing a short-sleeve shirt, and he had thick black hair with a bowl cut. And, you know, think about this, too. This is 1960s Appalachia. These are small towns. Everybody knows everybody. If somebody comes into town and you don't know, they immediately send up a red flag. It's like, I don't know this person. Who the hell is this guy? So he comes in, and he decides he walks up to her and starts asking her directions to this far out of the way town in like one of the far corners of West Virginia, like way away from Point Pleasant. And she said one of the things that struck her is he seemed to know more about West Virginia than I did. You know, he was like spouting all these facts off and like asking all these weird questions. And she said that he starts telling her a long and disjointed story about how he broke down in Detroit and had to hitchhike all the way down here. And she said the thing that she noticed about his eyes, though, was where they were almost hypnotic, and he kept getting closer and closer and closer to her. And she was like looking into his eyes, and then her phone rang, and she kind of snapped out of it. And she was like, excuse me, I need to answer this phone call. So she goes and answers the phone call. And while she's on the phone, he sees a little clicky pen on her desk. And he picks up this clicky pen and starts examining it like he's never seen it before, and starts playing with it and starts clicking it. And he's looking at it, and she just looks at him and she goes, you know, you can have that if you want it. And she said he let out a cackle and a squeal and ran off into the night. And she was like, what the hell was that about? You know? Yeah, like, oh, thank you, you know, and like runs off into the night. And she's like, what the hell was that about? And, you know, she doesn't think anything about it other than that was a weird encounter, but she sees him later on, and I'll tell that story here in a little bit. And so all these like weird sightings keep happening. She keeps publishing them in her newspaper. And in the spring of 1967, John Keel comes back because he's investigating cattle mutilation in the area because a bunch of cattle mutilation has started. So that's another thing on top of all this plethora of weird stuff that's happening in this area. Animal mutilation start up too. And while he's in the area investigating some animal mutilations, this teenager tracks him down and is like, Mr. Keel, you have to hear my story. No one will believe me. I have to tell you the story. And he's like, okay, shoot, you know, I mean, tell me your story. So this kid says in the spring of that year, in 1967, him and his girlfriend went to the hills just outside of Ravenswood, West Virginia. And they were two teenagers, and they were out there making out in a car. And he said, you know, what teenagers do, they were buck ass naked. They had stripped down to, you know, they were absolutely naked. And
they were doing a little back county brush effing.
Yeah, they were doing stuff, you know, they were doing stuff their parents would not approve of them doing, you know.
Yeah, they can't do that at the Sonic.
No, not at the Sonic. They cannot do that at Sonic. So they're making out in this car.
Damn it, Shelly, right as I take a drink of freaking tea.
Did you spit it all in your
almost damn near spit it all over my phone and all over my desk.
Just make it a point. Go ahead.
So at about 10:30 p.m., he says, all of a sudden, a blinding blue light appeared outside of the car, and they thought, oh, shit, it's the cops. And
I would have thought that, too.
So they opened it. He said, but the thing that struck him was they began to feel like a tingling sensation on their skin. And they open the door, and they get out, and they look to see what this thing is. And they said it was a big blue ball of flame hovering a couple of feet off the ground away from the car. And it had a low humming sound emanating from inside of it. And his girlfriend screamed, the light backed away, the humming got louder, and then it suddenly shot off and it was gone. And so they're freaking out. They put their clothes back on, and they start heading back towards town. And as they're driving, they just happen to look down at the clock, and the clock says 12:30 a.m. They thought they just watched this thing for a few minutes, but they had lost a whole 2 hours watching this thing. But to them, it just felt like a few minutes. So you have missing
2
time.
hours is
Wow.
huge.
Yeah,
Most
that's
people
huge.
only report like 5 minutes, 30 minutes. 2 hours is a huge block of time. I think one of the longest, what was it? Betty and Barney Hill lost like an hour, or
Yeah, they lost a lot of time.
but they didn't lose 2 hours. They lost less than that. 2 hours is significant.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, this freaks them out because they're like, we just watched this thing for 2 minutes. Like, why, why is it 2 hours later all of a sudden? And so they're like, should we go to the cops? Do we tell the cops what we saw? And they're like, no, let's not go to the cops. Let's just go home. Because if we go to the cops and go tell an adult what we were doing, we're going to get in trouble. They're going to tell our parents and we're going to get in a whole lot of trouble. So we'll just go home.
And they should have gotten in trouble. That's nasty.
Well, they wake up the next morning and both of their bodies are covered from head to toe in sunburn.
That's what happens when you do back county brush fucking. You get a sunburn on your booty.
That's exactly
They
what
should
it
know
is.
better. So children, don't do that. That's naughty.
But that, the day before they didn't have a sunburn. And
because they weren't doing nasty shit the day before.
And they didn't encounter a blue light that just came from out of nowhere. But both him and her both reported being covered and like from head to toe in like a massive sunburn. And he was so covered that his eyes swole shut and he had Cleve's conjunctivitis for 2 weeks.
Dang.
And he had to tell Keel because Keel was in the area and he was just like, look, I just need someone to believe me. And Keel's like, I do believe you, So Keel writes this story down. Now, while Keel is still investigating these things, are y'all still? Oh, no.
We're listening. Go ahead. You're fine.
He's frozen.
Are you kidding me?
Can you hear me now? Okay.
There you go. You're with us. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. I was like, oh, no, not again. So while
Keel hears things,
So he hears these things and he's still investigating all these cattle mutilations in the area. And he comes across another story. And this is a story I've been teasing you guys with for a minute when we went on our phone calls, because this story is just out of this world, no pun intended.
And Ryan wouldn't tell us the story prior. Usually we talk about kind of the topics, but Ryan would not tell us this one. He saved this one. So Ryan, I am waiting with bated breath.
Okay. So Keel collects this story from someone in the area. And what happened is on March the 5th, 1967, a 21-year-old guy named Bo Schertzer and a nurse were driving a bloodmobile in the mountains of West Virginia collecting blood. They had collected blood all day, and they were driving the bloodmobile along Route 2 right beside the Ohio River back to Huntington. Now, Shelley, me and you have gone down this road. This is the road that leads up to West Virginia Penn, and it hugs the Ohio River. It is extremely rural. It is out in the ass end of nowhere, and you actually cross over the Ohio and West Virginia border a couple times. You can, like, if you have to go to the gas station, you have to go across the river. You're in Ohio, and then you get back in West Virginia. I mean, it's middle of nowhere.
And Ryan, that is also on our way out there. Remember when I thought something ran in front of me that was a person? I slammed on the brakes, and we both saw it, but there was nothing in the road.
Yeah, there was absolutely nothing.
And I flipped the lights on. I flipped the lights on bright, and I slammed on the brakes, and there was nothing there.
Like, and it ran from out of the hills. Like, there's nothing but hills on this side and river on this side.
And it was so fast.
And it right across, and Shelley slammed on brakes. So this is that road, Shelley. Now,
I know right where you're talking about. It's scary.
It's a creepy ass road. And suddenly, in the woods, they see a white flash. And this white glow appears and rises slowly out of the woods and starts coming towards the bloodmobile. He sees this and hits the gas. The nurse is freaking out in the passenger seat. And he is booking it down through and it's a straightaway too. Until you get to certain points, it's a little windy, but it's mostly straightaway. I mean, he is putting pedal to the metal. And this object is keeping pace with this bloodmobile. And so he rolls down his window and looks.
Oh no, the suspense. Ryan,
himself to see the object is still on them. looks. So he's putting the pedal to
keep
the metal.
talking. I can hear you.
He looks behind himself to see if this object is still on their tail, and this object is hanging on with him. And what he sees is a arm being lowered out of the craft on his side. And the nurse starts freaking out because she's looked out the window on her right side and sees another arm being lowered like it's a damn pincer about to pick up the fucking bloodmobile and take it off to God knows where. So he like, I mean, I'm just picturing some sort of like
that thing
Looney
is
Tunes
playing
shit.
a giant claw game.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Whenever you said arm, I was thinking like these, and I was like,
No.
what in the hell is
he described it like a pincer. And the only thing I can think of, you ever watch Looney Tunes when they have like the thing that has the handles that extends and like grabs something?
Yeah.
That's all I could think of coming out of this
I was
damn
thinking giant
UFO.
claw game coming down and just kind of.
So, you know, why is this craft trying to snatch a bloodmobile of all damn things? That's strange in itself. So like I said, the nurse starts freaking out in the passenger seat. She sees the other extension coming down on her side, and he is hitting the gas as hard as it'll go. And this bloodmobile is not going fast enough. And this thing is about to grab it when all of a sudden a car approaches from the opposite direction. The headlight from the opposite direction hits this craft. The craft darts off into the sky and like leaves them alone. And so they drove straight into a radio station to tell the radio DJ, hey, this happened. It was reported on a radio station. I don't think it ever got officially published, but Keel collected this story while he was in West Virginia looking for the Mothman and looking for UFOs. And I just thought that story was hilarious, and I thought that you guys would really like to hear that, so I wanted to tell you all that story. But
why a radio station?
Maybe it was the closest thing they knew how to get to.
You gotta remember that back
There wasn't no gas station. There wasn't no grocery store.
But back then, I mean, that's probably one of the most major sources of news.
Being disseminated.
I mean, yeah. So, I mean, you can't make it to a police station, news station. They may have connections. They may
because I've met some DJs. Most of them are fat and unhelpful.
Hey! I studied radio in college. You shut up. I may be fat, but damn it, I am helpful.
You are helpful, right? And you're not fat.
I know,
I'm just saying. I don't consider someone who, hey, welcome to 701. I don't consider him to be my source of protection. Okay, that's all I have to say about that.
Well, then, I mean, but too, I mean, like, you know, you have like the newsman, you know, that's how people were getting news too back then. I mean, more so back then than now, you know. I mean, you got the newsman reporting for you.
Yeah.
I don't know.
This is the V4 all the time. Yeah.
Paul Harvey talking about a UFO.
Yeah, right.
Good day.
Paul Harvey. Good day. So while this is going on, a few days later, the weirdness kind of starts back up in Point Pleasant again. On March the 8th, 1967, a Point Pleasant police officer named Harold Harmon was patrolling out by the old TNT area. And he comes around a corner and he sees there's a little pond out there, and he sees a dark object hovering over a small pond. And he said it looked like a solid machine and appeared to have windows in the side, but he noticed it was rocking unevenly on top of the pond like a boat on the waves. And he sat there and he watched it for a few minutes, and the dark object just silently rose up and floated over the trees and floated off into the horizon. So he writes this down in a police report and reports it. Now, this is an interesting story that I picked up from the book too, because this is the only sighting that I found of the Mothman or a Mothman-like creature that differs from everybody's account. Because on March the 12th, 1967, a woman and her 20-year-old daughter were driving home from church, and they rounded a corner in a wooded area, and they saw a huge white creature in front of their car. And this white creature had curved wings that were 10 foot wide, and it had long hair. Now, every other person that has seen the Mothman
said it's gray.
Says it's gray and has red eyes.
And red eyes. And it hasn't, and it wasn't described as being furry. Or with hair.
I mean, they said that this thing just had hair on top of its head. And they watched it fly upwards. They saw them
albino Bigfoots, what they saw.
With wings. So they said it flew upwards and vanished from sight. And they drove home, astonished at what they had seen. And they're kind of discussing, you know, what they had seen. Well, they get home, And after they get home, their telephone starts going crazy. They start getting calls all hours of the night, and that pops and beeps and whistles starts coming through the phone line, like with all these other people who have seen something similar. Not only that, their TV suddenly has heavy interference, as if something is messing with the electronics in their home, and they can't figure out exactly what it is.
Why do I have the image of Gremlins where they're swinging on the antenna, and all of that? Sorry, it's just what I got.
So John Keel doesn't write anything else about this woman. He just like includes the story in the book. So, but that I found that particularly interesting because, like I said, that's the only sighting that I could find that has ever differed. And even from the modern Mothman sightings, I've never heard anything else like that. So what do you think we have going on here? Do you think, just based on the information I've told you so far, and there's a lot more coming, but what do you think we have going on here? Do you think we have multiple creatures? Do we have some sort of, like I said, I mean, do you think maybe the electromagnetic field is playing tricks on people's eyes? Do you think maybe, what do y'all think?
Okay, so the reason why I asked if anything had been published or whatnot, because obviously of like mass hysteria and everything like that. Now, I think that the people who come forward and they're like, oh, I got to get my story in and stuff like that, once more and more come. I mean, you can probably weed out a few of them and go, okay, those probably aren't real. But then there's other ones that when they start having the same details and the same feelings, and I mean, depending on what was published in the newspaper, that's my only thing. Depending on how much detail was published in the newspaper, to give other people the ability to create their own story about where they were. Now, what's weird about this one versus the other one is the gray versus the white. So are we looking at something that's two different creatures? Let's take it for what it is. Is it two different creatures? My first thing goes, okay, is one male, one female? Maybe are they, mating, whatever? Or at the same time, is Mothman a creature that, just like spirits and how they want to present themselves to us for us to be able to see them, can he also do, or it also do the same thing? How it wants this person to perceive it, is that how he can show himself or itself to them?
Well, now I will say this about these two people. These women were very religious, and they argued over whether or not what they saw was an angelic being. So do you think, like you were saying, that however it wants to be perceived to someone, it is? So
they got furry angels.
But see, then you get into the discussion of how much does this creature or cryptid know about us?
True.
Prior to meeting us, or if we're in there, what can they pick up on? If they were arguing that it was an angelic being and they were very religious, is that something that this creature or cryptid knew and was able to present itself differently so that he could possibly get them closer, make them feel comfortable, or anything like that? I mean, still,
did they mention the eye color of this being?
No, they just said, I mean, it was kind of one of those things, you come around like a bend, you see it in the road, and then all of a sudden you don't see it. You know what I mean?
But everybody else for Mothman has said big red reflector eyes, and they have been able to see them whether they were in a car or strolling down the road or picking their nose. They've seen big red reflector eyes. That has been the main consistency. That has been what has seems to stuck in everybody's mind. In that case, the fact that they didn't see any big red reflector eyes, if it was something that was truly wanting to be seen, it truly was the Mothman, I would think that characteristic would be there. So
or can it change it? Again, you go back to, can it present itself how
it wants to be perceived?
It perceives us to that. Yeah, you know where I'm going with that.
Which then again, we can kind of go back to Indrid Cold and how Indrid Cold presented himself to Woody Derenberger, and like he's also part of this too. Is this all maybe the same entity or entities, and it's presenting itself as whatever to achieve whatever means it wants to?
Well, you're doing a little. We're doing a little changing here, because something that is a being that is supposedly from space, you would think would be far more advanced. I'm thinking of Mothman more like a Bigfoot, this creature of Earth that may that's, and if I think of an earthbound, like a bunny rabbit can't suddenly become a werewolf. I mean, well, of course they can, but we're going to say for argument's sake they can't. So I don't think of an earthbound creature as being able to shift and change that much.
So how do we know it's earthbound though? How do we know it's not interdimensional? That's another.
All I have to say is a chameleon.
That's what I'm saying. Like, could it possibly be something that is presenting itself as all these different things in order to achieve some sort of means that we don't understand? I don't know. That's the $64,000 question, and I don't think anyone will ever know that answer. It was just something I kind of wanted to throw out there.
I want to hear about the bridge. That's my favorite part of the story.
Well, we're getting there. We're almost there.
I'm ready to hear about the bridge.
So John Keel collects this last story, and he goes to investigate another UFO flap in the Northeast. So while he's gone, Mary continues to publish all these stories, and she continues to talk to Keel, and she's getting so many UFO and creature stories she can barely keep up with her column in the newspaper. And while this is happening, 3 very strange visitors show up in Point Pleasant. Once again, you live in a small Appalachian town in the 60s. You know who your neighbors are. You know who everyone is. I don't care if they live out in the sticks. You know old man Johnson that lives out in the sticks. But these 3 guys show up, and they were described as being very tall, with dark complexions, very good looking, with pointed features, heavily tanned skin, and they spoke a fluent, unaccented English that was not relative to the area that they were in, because they sound more like me than, someone from Middle America. And so they would show, but the thing is they would show up late at night and knock on people's doors and say they were selling magazine subscriptions and ask them very personal questions, kind of like the MIB that we talked about a while ago.
We have intergalactic Jehovah's Witnesses. Is that what you're trying to tell me?
I guess, because whenever they were pressed about whatever publication they were working for or whatever place they were trying to, they couldn't come up with a magazine name.
Oh shit.
And the weird thing about them too is they were always spotted on foot. There was never a car associated with them, and they were going into rural areas knocking on people's doors. How the hell did they get out there?
It really is an intergalactic Jehovah's Witness. Yes, it is.
Those Jehovah's Witnesses are magic. They come out of nowhere and they sneak up on you, and you're like, "Oh shit, they're banging on my door," and you didn't even see them coming because they're that sneaky.
Absolutely. And
am I wrong? Somebody tell me I'm wrong.
No, you're not wrong.
Don't come for me, Jehovah's Witnesses. Just don't do it. And the fat DJs don't come for me either. You know who you are. Love everyone.
So, despite doing her due diligence and trying to find out where these 3 people were staying in Point Pleasant or anywhere around there, she could not find any sort of hotel records or anything that coincided with these 3 strangers that just happened to show up. So, again, another group of strange visitors coming into these small towns that make absolutely no sense. Now, during the same week this is happening, there's a woman who works at the unemployment office in Point Pleasant. Her name is Mabel McDaniel. And she works there, and she says a strange man showed up the second week of March. He was wearing a black coat and a black hat. He had dark skin. He had a dark skin tan, and his eyes were very glassy. And he showed up to her unemployment office, and he spoke poor English, and he kept asking her for trip insurance at the unemployment office. And she was like, "What are you talking about?" And he keeps asking for trip insurance and keeps asking her over and over again. And she's like, "This is the unemployment office. What do you mean trip insurance? You can't get that here. I don't know what the hell you're talking about." And he tells her that he had visited the office of the messenger and had spoken to Mary Hire and came over there to speak to her. Mary Hire said she never saw this person in her entire life. He had indeed not come to the office and spoken to her. And the weird and peculiar thing about him talking to this woman at the unemployment office is she said he spoke in a garbled, sing-songy manner, and he moved in an unsteady, drunken way. And she just couldn't figure out who he was or where he was from and why he was asking for trip insurance. So she was like, "Get the hell out of my office." And he just walked off into the night or into the day, and no one ever saw him again. Now, This was enough to bring John Keel back to Point Pleasant, because he's like, every time I leave, all this crazy shit breaks out. All these weird visitors show up, and I need to go back there and I need to see what's going on. So he comes back, and as he comes back, there's a massive UFO sighting outbreaks. So him and Mary Hyre drive to the place where these UFOs are being spotted in Gallipolis Ferry, and they're sitting there and they watch these UFOs streak across the sky on April the 2nd, 1967. Well, Mary decides she's going to call it a night, and then John has his most profound UFO experience he said he ever had in his life while he's sitting out there by himself. And once again, being a true paranormal investigator, okay, you're tired. I'm going to sit out here by myself. You go right ahead. I want to see what the hell is going on. And he said at about 1:35 a.m., a circular object came down from the sky, passed parallel to his car, and it was so close he could make it out. He said it was extremely colorful with a greenish top with a red light on it and reddish portholes around the rim. He was terrified, but at the same time he was awestruck, and the object disappeared behind a grove of trees next to his car. He wakes up the next morning and has Klieg's conjunctivitis. Said he felt like he had sand in his eyes and his eyes swole up. So another case of this particular ailment from people who are having these encounters in Point Pleasant.
Diagnosed by doctors. So that is
Yes.
the common, extremely credible thread in the story so far.
Absolutely. Now, while he's in town this time, a woman over in Gallipolis approaches Mary Hyre and says, I need to talk to Keel. I have a story. And Mary's like, okay, I'll introduce you to him. So she takes this woman to John Keel, and this woman's name is Miss Bryant. Miss Bryant begins to tell him a fantastically wild story, and I think you guys will kind of jive with this because it contains some similarities between Woody Derenberger's story. So she tells Keel that she wants someone to believe her. She just no one believes her, and she just wants to tell somebody that will believe her. And he's like, okay, shoot. So she tells him a story that on November the 2nd or 3rd, 1966, which was the same night that Indrid Cold was spotted with Woody Derenberger, that she was behind a building in Gallipolis getting ready to go home, and it was about 7 or 8 o'clock. Now, you know this as well as I do, in these small towns, they roll up the sidewalks at 5 o'clock, and especially in the 60s, they rolled them up, and there's no one downtown at 7, 8 o'clock at night. That's pretty much the middle of the night back then, And she's getting ready to leave, and she said suddenly there was a flash of light directly above her. She looked up, and she saw a craft hovering above her. And she said she was absolutely petrified, and she could not move, but the craft was like a big cylinder and flew over her and landed about 20 feet away from her. And the door opened, and 2 men got out of the craft. She said they were normal looking with a dark tan skin, pointed features, a pointed nose, pointed chin, and high cheekbones. And they were wearing coveralls resembling a uniform. They walked over to Miss Bryant and started talking to her, and they asked her weird, mundane questions, much like Cold had asked Derenberger, like, who are you? Where are you from? What do you do for a living? And she said she was absolutely terrified, but she was able to answer their questions. And the thing that struck her about them is their voices were very high-pitched and they were very sing-songy. And she said it was like a record player being played at the wrong speed. And they kept asking her over and over again, what is your time? And she couldn't answer the question, and she would ask what they were talking about, and they wouldn't clarify, but they kept asking her, what is your time? They were obsessed with time for some reason. And she said that they talked for a while, and they got back in their craft, and they took off. And she thought about how strange it was and was scared, but she put it in the back of her mind and didn't think anything else about it. But a few days later, her fear was reignited when she was walking in the middle of downtown. She saw them again, and this time they were walking around in broad daylight, dressed in normal clothes, walking down Main Street, and they nodded at her as if they knew her. And it scared her half to death, so she went to the cops and told the cops. The cops laughed her out of the building, and she has just been scared ever since. And she just wanted to tell someone, once again, somebody, please believe me, this happened to me. And, like I said, this seems very similar to what Derenberger experienced, and it happened on the same night. So you have this kicking off everything going on in Point Pleasant again and around in that area. So Keel collects that story, and he is in the area again after he collects his story, and he decides to go to some random farmhouses and start talking to people and collecting more information to see if he can get more information about what's going on in the area. And he had stopped telling people where he was going because he began to feel like he was being followed, because he would go to these houses, and when he would go to these houses, he would be interviewing the residents of the home. And about 10 minutes after he gets there, in these rural farmhouses, the phone would ring and there would be no one on the other end, or there would be those whistles, pops, and garbled messages on the other end of the phone. So he starts thinking he's being followed and starts kind of freaking out a little bit and just doesn't tell anybody where he's going. Well, one day he's out there and he goes up to this house and he knocks on the door, and an older man comes out with a shotgun pointing it at Keel, and Keel's like, tries to explain who he is. And the man says, I know exactly who you are. I know where you are. It's like, I know who you are. I know what you are. And I don't want anything to do with you. And so Keel's like, okay. So he leaves, and he goes and he goes to Mary Hire immediately. He's like, hey, I went to this place. This guy ran me off with a shotgun. Would you mind coming back out there with me tomorrow?
The guy wants him to leave, and he's going to
Yes.
go back out. Even had a shotgun pulled him. I would honor and respect the man's wishes about. I don't think I need to go back out there.
He ain't lying, but at least somebody's smart in this story with a shotgun.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Finally,
Fighting
we got
everything.
Somebody. Yeah.
So
get off.
They go back out there the next day. Yeah, it's like, hey, how do I get back to town? Back the way you came.
Mm-hmm.
You know. So they go out there the next day. And Mary Hire goes and talks to this dude, and the guy comes over to Keel, and he's super apologetic, and he's like, hey, I'm very sorry. He said, before you got here yesterday, I received a phone call from someone that sounded like my neighbor. And the person on the other end of the line said that there was a crazy man in the area, and he warned me about you and said that you were crazy and that you were a real dangerous type with a beard, and that you had just come to see my neighbor, and that I shouldn't have anything to do with you. And after you left yesterday, I called my neighbor and I said, hey, were you the one that called a while ago? And the neighbor had indeed not made the phone call. He was in his field working all day, and to the point where his wife had to go to the very back of the field to get the neighbor to come to the house. So someone called to warn them about Keel before Keel could even get there. And think about this too. This is the 1960s. There's no cell phones.
Yeah.
So that's just another weird story. So that happens to him, and he goes back to New York in the spring of 67, and he's walking down 42nd Street in New York, and he sees a tall, thin man come around the corner with a gaunt, pointed face, and he raises his camera, takes a picture of Keel and Keel's lady friend, and runs up the street. And he'd never seen this man before, so he's thinking, someone's tailing me. Like, not only are they tailing me in West Virginia, but they're tailing me in my home in New York City. And he's not the only one that is having these problems. Mary Hire is also having these problems while he's in New York. She's back in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. She goes to a town hall meeting, and she comes home at about 11:30 at night. This big black Cadillac pulls up in front of her house. A man gets out with a camera, puts it up to his face, snaps a picture of Mary Hire, and drives off into the night. So you have all these people being visited by MIB or government, whoever the fuck is following these people. And this happens, and things get quiet for a while. But then Keel is drawn back to Point Pleasant again in August of that year because this family is having problems, and he wants to go interview this family. Now, this family lives about 60 miles north of Point Pleasant in Belpere, Ohio. And the father's name was Ben, and Ben is coming home from work. Ben sees a UFO over a chemical plant on the river right there in Ohio. And he has a spotlight attached to his car. He flashes his spotlight at the car. He flashes his spotlight at the UFO. The spotlight goes out instantly, and the car dies. He gets out, looks under the hood, and all of his electrical components have burnt out in his car after this UFO appears. And so he goes home and doesn't tell anybody about it. Well, within like hours of being home, his family begins to receive calls with beeps and metallic noises, and sometimes the calls contain metallic voices telling him to go to places, and he never followed the instructions because he's like, I don't know who the hell you are calling me at my home, telling me where to go. So he never followed the instructions. But shortly thereafter, they began to have poltergeist activity. And he says that drawers began to open by themselves, objects began to disappear, and a heavy cabinet that was in the living room began to move across the living room on its own. Now, Keel goes out here to interview them and tries to move this cabinet and can't move it by himself. So something with a lot of force has moved this cabinet across the living room.
Yeah.
So Ben is telling the story, and he said that he later had to go to Parkersburg. And he goes to Parkersburg, West Virginia, and he sees these two men in black he said they had a dark tan, and they see him coming down the street, and they grinned at him as if they knew him, and he noticed they were having trouble walking, and they seemed confused or drunk, and he was so freaked out that he went across the street. So another sighting of the men in black in the area. And he tells Keel that 2 weeks before Keel came to visit him, a black car pulled up outside of their house. A man in a black suit got out and took a picture of their house with a large camera. So all this crazy crap is going on in West Virginia. And so all these MIBs show up. Well, this is where things start to get really weird. Because Keel begins to get... Yeah, yeah.
This is where they start to get weird?
Yeah, I mean, I know it's weird as shit already, but this is where they start to get weird. So Keel is sitting at home, and he starts getting phone calls from contactees saying that they have been contacted by this being named Apple. I'm not kidding. His name is Apple, spelled Apol. And he's talking to the contactees, and at first, Apple would only speak to him through contactees. Like he would not talk to him one-on-one. And the contactees described Apple as being tan and wearing a big black suit and driving a big black Cadillac. All these contactees who contacted Keel. And so eventually, over time, Apple would eventually begin to call Keel himself and communicate with him. And he would have long conversations with Keel over the phone. And he told Keel that a major event was going to happen on December the 15th. And he said it was going to be a blackout. And Keel is like still skeptical of someone randomly calling him on the phone and telling him this stuff. So he starts asking questions. And he's like, okay, if you truly know what's going to happen, can you tell me where my mother's father was born? And Apple on the other end of the phone says Cameron Mills, New York. And he is 100% right on the money. And he says, okay, well, if you truly know what's going to happen and you truly know the future, where did I misplace my stopwatch? And so Apple tells him, check the box in the right corner of your bedroom closet. Keel goes and checks the box. Sure enough, his stopwatch is in there. So he starts to take stock in what Apple is saying. So Apple calls him one day and tells him that there will be a terrible disaster on the Ohio. And he implied that one of the factories that line the Ohio River, one of the power plants, might explode. So Keel calls Mary Hire and he's like, look, I have information that something may happen. Just keep your eyes peeled. Let me know if anything happens. And so things are quiet for a while. But on December the 15th, 1967, Keel is watching the National Christmas tree lighting, fully expecting for there to be a blackout, because that's what Apple told him was going to happen. And he's got his candles out, he's got his flashlights out, and he's watching the National Christmas tree lighting, and President Johnson lights the tree, and suddenly an announcer breaks into the news and says the Silver Bridge in West Virginia has collapsed into the water during rush hour. So a little bit about this bridge is it was built in 1928, and it was the main artery between West Virginia and Ohio. It wasn't designed for the amount of traffic that they had on it. And it was the next crossing was about 50 miles up the river. So that was like the main one. Now, some people claim they saw Mothman on the bridge that day, but I haven't been able to find any documentation of that. I think that's a lot of hearsay, but people say when it collapsed, they saw it begin to shake, and one of the eye bars on the Ohio side snapped, And witnesses said it was about 5:04 p.m. The bridge began shaking, and the bridge then twisted and writhed, and the main span broke away from it, and the anchor broke away from the anchor points, and 50 cars plunged into the Ohio River, and they were able to rescue some people, but 46 people went to a watery grave in the Ohio. Now,
Damn.
the question is how the hell did Apple know something like that was going to happen? Number one. Number two, was the Mothman a harbinger? Was the Mothman showing up in order to warn these people in his own unique way that this may happen? And number three, why did the activity that had led all the way up to this, where people were having all these strange encounters with Mothman, with Men in Black, with all these strange visitors, why did the activity all of a sudden drop off drastically after the Silver Bridge collapsed? Now, that doesn't mean that Mothman isn't still being sighted in the area, because he is. But, for what reason did all of this just culminate and then just completely just kind of pretty much die off afterwards? Do you think it was a warning, or do you think that maybe they knew something was going to happen, so all this stuff was attracted to this area to, I don't know.
I wonder what would happen if that old boy would have followed the instructions he was given way off early in the beginning of the story. Whenever he said that he got instructions and he didn't follow them because he didn't know who was giving him instructions. I wonder if actually they were trying to save the town from that collapse.
Maybe.
And because no one would listen to them, they got more and more insistent, more and more sightings. And they just needed someone to follow the instructions, and no one did it. And my apologies for stepping away. My phone was dying because
oh, no worries.
It only had 5% battery, and I didn't want it to die because that's my favorite part, is the Silver Bridge story. And I think perhaps, I wonder what would happen had someone had followed the instructions they got.
Yeah, I mean, I think John Keel did, and he was given like some bad information about there being a blackout, but something really did happen on December the 15th. And I wonder if what instructions the old boy was getting on the phone that actually lived in West Virginia. But who knows?
I would be really, what was his occupation, Ryan? Just out of curiosity.
The boy, the guy that was living in West Virginia.
The one that got the instructions on the phone and decided
they never said. They said he was just coming home from work and he saw that thing.
I wonder if he was a contractor of some kind, or a carpenter, or someone that could have looked at the structure of the bridge.
He could have been. I don't know. I think that's a good point. And I think to this day, if I'm not mistaken, that's the worst bridge collapse in U.S. history. There is nothing else that compares to that as far as bridge collapses go. Now, there is something about the whole harbinger theory that I did find. So the Mothman Prophecies movie came out in 2002. And all of a sudden, you started to get stories about Mothman showing up at Chernobyl and Mothman showing up before 9/11 and stuff like that. Now, the screenwriter of the movie, he says that in the book, everything, it kind of culminates in the Silver Bridge collapse. And he kind of used that for more so of a plot device where Mothman would show up at all these tragedies around the world. So the whole harbinger thing may have gained a foothold after the movie came out, more so than when the actual bridge collapsed. Because from what I found, the town didn't really buy that whole harbinger theory, they themselves. But ever since the movie came out, and ever since like it's gained more popularity and more traction, that has become more of a thing associated with Mothman.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know why he was there. Or
you've made a really good point, and it's something that I touched on earlier. Is that I mean, after something like this comes out in publication, whatever that may be, movie, newspapers, whatever, you're always going to have a whole group of other individuals who are going to have stories, and then things are going to start being tied to that. And now I'm sitting back here going, okay, is the Mothman real? Well, I can't 100% say. I've never laid eyes on him, but
Mhm.
there are some people who are very credible witnesses that have detailed the exact same experiences. There are credible threads throughout all this story that kind of ties it all together. But I think a lot of the harbinger theory has to do with after publications of things come out, it's, oh, well, the Silver Bridge collapsed. Well, remember all the Mothman signs? Oh yeah, he was there. I saw him, and that's all it takes. So that's my theory on the harbinger theory.
Yeah, I think you're 100% correct. I think it just kind of enters that public lexicon. It kind of enters that public zeitgeist, basically, where everyone kind of starts, when people get an idea and someone spouts an idea, a lot of people, as it gets bigger and bigger, like that idea may grow and grow and grow. And I think that's exactly what you're saying. I think that's exactly what happened with the whole Mothman thing.
Put it back on our level as paranormal investigators that have to do with spirits and ghosts and all that stuff like that. How many people have we talked to whenever we see things that are poltergeistish or something like that, and the first thing that they automatically think of is, oh my God, it's a demon.
Absolutely.
Because they've been conditioned to think that, through publication, through media, through, that poltergeist activity is a demon. And that's not the case.
That's
just
not
like
the case.
Not at all.
Yeah.
99.9% of the time, that is 100% not the case. I mean, it's not the case.
Yeah.
I mean,
but
you get that very rare, small, slim type thing that's the case. And I agree. I think that they have been conditioned to, again, as time goes on and the story grows, everybody adds their piece to the story and their bit to the legend, and they tune it because they don't quite remember that detail. But oh yeah, I think they said that that time the creature was white, and then suddenly the creature is white with no red eyes, but now it looks like an angel, and now it's got beautiful flowing hair, and because when they put in their mind, if they think it's an angelic being, they're going to put in what they associate an angel to look like, which is white with wings and flowing hair of whatever choose a color.
Right.
So yeah, I think that you can get what is that called? That when it's the collective thought process that comes about to basically birth a story and grow a story. What is that? Somebody will know it. Somebody's smarter than me.
Oh my God, I know exactly what you're talking about.
I know what you're saying. I can't think of the name either.
It's like with all these other cryptids that somebody came along with this idea of, like, say, Slender Man or something like that, and then
the tulpa. Or the legend.
Well, no, when it's a collective group, when all these people have added to the story, and now that has become the story, it's this collective input to create the story. And Slenderman's a very good example of it. It was an online thing that was just collectively entered. Huh?
Are you trying to say urban legend, maybe, or?
No. It's when
there's a word she's looking for. Yeah.
There's a word.
Yeah.
I'm not that smart. I've been through a tornado. Leave me alone. I'm going to ride that horse until I'm not traumatized anymore.
Well, after the Silver Bridge collapse, like I said, there was a big fall off in activity, but that doesn't mean the activity stopped. I mean, Mothman was sighted by several people up through the 70s, up through the 80s, up to the 90s. Now, one of the most prolific sightings that I found in the 1990s was there was a guy who was driving home late one night, and he lived back up in one of the hollers close to Point Pleasant. And he's driving home one night, and he rounds a corner by an old family graveyard of his that his family owns. And he sees a creature standing in the middle of the road. And at first he said he thought it was a bird, but soon he realized it wasn't. And it was almost see-through, but it was solid enough to where his headlights reflected off of it. But it was still transparent enough to where he could see through the other side of it. And the best way he described it, he said it was almost like it was phasing in or shifting into a solid form. And he said this thing stood up, it spread its wings, and it shot straight up. And he all of a sudden was overcome with a feeling of intense terror and dread. And he hit the gas and got the hell out of there. So to me, that tells me that whatever Mothman is could be interdimensional. If it's phasing in and becoming solid from just phasing into our reality, maybe, or phasing into being solid enough to where his headlights reflect off of it, but still it's transparent enough to where he can see through it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only thing that makes sense to me. What do y'all think?
When he's saying phasing in, I mean, is he talking about like fading in, fading out? I mean, is it you know how like
Yeah.
back in the day whenever we actually had like cable and all that stuff, and
Mhm.
like the channel would come in kind of wavy and phase in to the TV screen. I mean, is he
I,
talking about
I didn't watch any of those wavy channels. I don't know what you're talking about.
you and I are the same age, and if I can fucking remember them, I know you can.
I know what you're talking about.
Anyways,
Yeah.
but is he talking about like that, or is he just talking about like it's just slowly fades in as maybe like an apparition forming or something like that?
I guess so. I mean, because he didn't really go into much detail other than he said it was like phasing in, like it fading in, I guess.
Okay.
And I mean, we've seen apparitions do that,
Mm-hmm.
but we're still the jury's still out on what those are too.
It's very true.
Interdimensional time rip. I think I had it right at the beginning of the show.
You could. I mean, that could explain the missing time that a lot of people experience when all this happens. But so that was like the most prolific sighting that I had seen that happened after all the Point Pleasant stuff in the 60s and everything. And there are still sightings to this day. There's a really good documentary called Mothman Legacy to go check out that talks about some of the sightings from the 1970s on after the Point Pleasant flap, after the bridge collapses. That's a really good documentary to go check out. But the crazy thing that I found in my research is that Mothman has now been spotted, and more so spotted, in a major U.S. city. That city being Chicago. You can find so many sightings that people have of Mothman in Chicago. I'm talking police officers, airport workers, just regular run-of-the-mill people, pilots. And for some reason, it really likes to hang out around O'Hare International. And I don't know why. No one can really figure that out.
Maybe it's hitching rides back and forth somehow. Or it's like I'm going to travel the world. I don't feel like flying the whole way.
I just like using my own wings. I'm just going to hang on to this thing. So
I'm tired.
But you can find so many stories about just pilots and security and police officers all out there seeing this thing. But the first sighting that I could find that was reported by like a first responder, basically, was a police officer on June the 29th, 2017, says that at about 11:15 p.m., he was in the Auburn Gresham neighborhood, and him and his partner were out on patrol. And they come across a group of people who are obviously agitated, and they're pointing up at the corner of a building. And they flag the cops down. The cops pull over, and they said that the people were very frightened and excited. And him and his partner get out, and they shine their light up, and they look up, and what they see is a 6-foot, 6-inch, large winged being with a 10-foot wingspan, sitting on the corner of this building. And when they tried to shine their flashlight at it, the creature screamed and flew away. And this is coming from a police officer in Chicago. And he says that they interviewed a bunch of the people who were out there who saw this thing. And they said for the past 3 nights, they kept seeing this thing flying around their neighborhood. And this was the first time that it was kind of still enough where they could get a good look at it. So
nobody had a camera.
I guess not. I mean, now, but go ahead, Blake.
No, go, because I'm actually I'm gonna tell about my own, not my own sighting, but the sighting of my own that I found.
well, that's the thing too, is this as well as I do. Like, we've been on investigations before and been getting really good evidence and forget to pull out a camera.
But there's 3 of us. If this was a mass sighting over multiple nights, if 2 nights in a row I'd missed this dude showing up, full body apparition in the center of the old Park Hall, the 3rd night at 11:21, I'm gonna be like, come on, boy.
Yeah.
But you have to think too, like you compared it to Skinwalker Ranch earlier. When it comes to the paranormal, there's almost a trickster element. It always happens just off camera, or it always happens as soon as you put your camera away, or it, rarely do we catch. I mean, we catch stuff.
If this is massive people seeing this, not one of those assholes had a camera.
I don't know. Maybe they were scared.
You're talking 2017, so it's not like they don't have
True.
good cameras and everybody has a camera in their pocket.
Yeah, they have a camera in their pocket.
That's true, but maybe
See,
they get so caught up in
if
the
it's
Hold
a
up.
mass
What-
sighting, see, this is the debunker in me going, you're telling me Chicago, and nobody.
I'm gonna have to agree with one of the comments from our viewers, Paul. He says that's a gargoyle because that's the first thing I thought of. I was like, did it move? Did it scream? And you said it screamed and it flew
Yeah, it
away.
spread
But I
its
was
wings
sitting there
and flew
thinking,
away.
I'm with Paul on that. I'm like, that's a gargoyle. That
I thought they only lived in Transylvania. What the hell he doing in Chicago?
I don't know. I mean, there were stories I heard of people like being on Lake Michigan, like on the Chicago, but being close to the Chicago shoreline, and this thing flying out and circling their boat to the point where it scares them so bad they have to take the boat in, and they're all describing once again like the 6 foot 6 foot tall thing with the 10-foot wingspan.
Okay, so the one that I stumbled across, because I mean, we have ones that take on the vast majority of research you did this week, but we always look for our own little input and whatnot.
Yeah,
actually, back in Point Pleasant. Back in 2016, there was a gentleman driving down Route 2, and he saw this big, huge, man-sized winged creature jumping from tree to tree. So what does he do? Shelly, what you just asked, pulls out his camera, starts snapping photos of it. This is one of the photos. Now, this is from, I think it's Channel 11 up there, WCHS station. Want to make sure they're giving them credit, which not their photo, but it was their news. Anyways, this is what he captures.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
So
that asshole had a camera. He was Johnny on
now,
the spot,
okay,
and oh my God, look, he got a picture.
Okay, yes, this is a picture. Could it be Mothman? I don't know, because I'm going to tell you my theory about this is because you cannot see. Here's the issue about being too zoomed in. You can't see what's off the camera. How big are those trees? What is the comparison in size to the limbs that are right there within those frames and all that kind of stuff? To me, this could be an owl that caught a snake.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
Damn it. Now that's all I see is an owl that caught a snake.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Mothman, that asshole faked it. I'm such a waffler today.
But he was adamant about the fact that this thing was like 6 feet tall, 10-foot wingspan, jumping from tree to tree. Me personally, I can't buy that because I can't see. I don't know. I'd have to take him at his word for it. And being an investigator, I would not be doing right if I didn't question it to try to debunk it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so just because I can't see the comparison in size, I can't 100% say that this is Mothman. But of course, they ran the story because it's, as Shelley always says, it's interesting.
It is interesting.
It's very interesting. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think that could be just an owl that caught a snake and is flying away with it.
Yeah,
but y'all, that's Mothman.
But when
I think that's Mothman.
That's Mothman.
I think but when it comes to the encounter that I found from the Chicago police officer, I think that lends a bit more credence to it because this is someone who is a trained observer. This is someone who is trained to, if they see something like this, to make a report about it, try to get as much detail as possible. And we don't have photographic proof that it happened. I can't say 100% sure, but I think it lends more credibility to it when it is someone who is a trained observer.
Someone who's a trained observer who cannot afford to be thought of as not quite right.
Exactly. I mean
that takes a lot of guts to risk your career and your credibility whenever you are in a position of authority. That takes a lot to kind of say, okay, here's what I saw, and I know, get on the crazy train and ride with me, but I swear it's the truth. And 50% of people are going to look at you and go, y'all need to take his gun away. And the other 50% of people will be like, I saw it too. So that's a big risk.
When I'm doing research like that, especially with stories like this, I will regular citizen versus police officer or something along that lines, like you said, trained observer. I will always lean more towards the police account, than I will a regular citizen, just because, as Shelley said, I mean, yeah, you're putting your job on the line, at that point. So if you're if you're willing to write a police statement about it, or do your paperwork for it or whatever,
Mhm.
that adds a lot more to it as well for me.
Yeah. Any like military, any cop, any EMS, firefighter, someone who was trained to describe anything and everything that they possibly can. Yeah. I mean, that puts more credence to me. And, it's not just police officers that are seeing this. There's also people. The TSA had an encounter with the with the Mothman, and this is the most recent encounter that I found. Now,
Did
on
they
August
search his
4th,
bag and make him throw away his toothpaste too? Because it's regular size instead of fun size.
Yeah, they told me he couldn't bring any liquids on the plane or anything like that. So he just. But anyway, so on August the 4th, 2021, 3 United Cargo workers were walking to their cars at an employee parking lot that backs up to a wooded area. And they saw something dark moving on the other side of the fence. And they're watching this, and all of a sudden, a white SUV pulls up on the other side of the fence, close to where the movement was happening. 2 guys jumped out with flashlights and aimed flashlights at whatever this thing was. And what they saw was a 6 to 7 foot tall humanoid, dark gray or black, with 2 large glowing red eyes. And it's 6 to 7 feet tall. It spread its wings and flew up into the air. And as it flew up, the people gathered close to it, and the few that were around the 2, it flew up and flew around the people close to it in 2 big circles and made a screeching noise. They said that sounded like truck brakes, and it flies off. And as they're standing there watching this, all of a sudden a TSA SUV pulls up with its lights on and tell the 3 men either get inside now or leave the area. So the guys got in their cars and left. And they said they watched that TSA vehicle go and tell everyone to leave the parking lot immediately. So do they know what the hell this thing is? You know what I'm saying? Like,
I don't think anybody really knows what this thing is. I mean, I think that people get descriptions. I think people get descriptions of it, and they have experiences with it and all that stuff. But as for what the pure definition of Mothman is, I mean, the best that we can come up with is a cryptid.
Yeah,
it is something that has not been classified by, I guess, the scientists of this planet. I don't know. We can't explain Mothman.
Like the thing that I want to know, and the thing that like I said, it's my favorite cryptid. It's the one that I know so much about, and it's the one that has like one of the best stories around it. Is I want to know, and I don't know if I'll ever know, but is this a flesh and blood creature, or is this something from somewhere else that we just cannot explain? And I think that's what most people who like hear about cryptids want to know. Is it flesh and blood? Is it something biological that we can classify as an actual biological entity on this planet? Is it an undiscovered species that we don't know about, and maybe it shows up every once in a while? I don't know. But one thing's for sure, wherever Mothman shows up, a lot of weirdness shows up. And with Mothman, you may see a UFO and you may see a man in black. And I don't know if you want to come in contact with either the Mothman or a man in black. So
hey, just like we want to go, just like when we want to go squatching, we should go mothing.
We can actually go to, when you go to Point Pleasant, you can get directions to go out to the old TNT factory. I would be so down for that.
Ryan. Not everybody can get directions. He gave us a map.
No.
He said he doesn't normally give people the map. We got a map.
I don't remember getting a map.
I got a map.
Oh, well, you can figure out where
maybe I wasn't supposed to tell you I got a map.
Well, no,
I got a map.
I got a print.
So in other words, Shelly will gladly guide you through there. Just kidding.
So I got a printout that tells me where it is. I don't know if I thought it was like behind the counter right there. Huh, maybe not. Anyway,
it told you the address behind the counter. It didn't give you the map. He even had the little domes drawn off.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I didn't get the map. I got the address. So we could put it in the GPS and get out there. But you can, as far as I know, you can go out there and check it out. I think people do it all the time. I would love to go out there. If we ever make it back in the area, that's something I definitely want to do. If you ever find yourself in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, go to the Mothman Museum, because the guy that runs it is a really cool dude, and he has collected so many stories. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think he's written a couple of Mothman books himself from additional stories that he's collected. So go in there, drop by, go to that museum, take a picture in front of the statue like me and Shelly did. It's
The
worth
multiple
checking out.
statues.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I have. Here, I'll show what we're talking about. Yep.
Yeah,
There's
that's the
Shelley's.
one in downtown.
Yep.
But inside are a bunch of Mothman statues you can take pictures with too.
Yeah, I think what are there? There are 4 different ones. Like that's one, and the one that's squatting down on the floor is one, and then there's that guy
that
who
one.
looks like it's a parachute, dude in a parachute, and then there's that one. I think there's another one, that's kind of like the beigey color, but
Nah, I don't have a picture of that. If there is,
I may not have sent that one. I figured you were getting tired of looking at Mothman pictures. So by the time I was done sending them all to you.
But yeah, like I would highly recommend you make the trip to Point Pleasant, go to the Mothman Museum, go check it out. If you are, it's a beautiful drive up there too. It's a beautiful area. Point Pleasant is a very pretty town. Point Pleasant is a very pristine town. Go check her out. But that is my coverage of the Mothman. I hope it was a good time for everybody. So.
It was a lot of information and very detailed. I learned a lot.
That's Ryan's baby. That was Ryan's baby.
Yeah.
And,
absolutely.
We made an hour detour out of our way to make sure we went by there, just so you could show me, because Ryan had already been. He wanted to show me, and I said, "All right, let's go." And it was fun. I bought I think several T-shirts.
I did
spent
too.
a lot of money there.
I did too.
We'll get back up there.
Maybe that's why I got a map.
Could have been.
But yeah, I mean, it definitely was. And now, like, I cut out a lot of information too. So there is still way more. If you want to get really into it, go get the Mothman Prophecies book. I highly recommend. It's a good read. I blew through it really fast. It's just one of those things that keeps you hooked, and you just want to see what happens next. Yeah. So that's it.
Wow. We appreciate y'all joining us for this episode of Everything Vaguely Paranormal, even with a 20-minute delay of technical difficulties in the beginning.
Hey, we made it fun. That makes it exciting. Will they go on? Will they go on? Will they go on? Will they go on?
Yeah.
Oh my God, they're frozen. Oh my God, they're not. Oh yeah, it's fun.
But we want to thank y'all for joining us, and please remember to go and follow us on everything Vaguely Paranormal across all social media platforms. We are on every single social media page that you can think of: Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, Instagram. We do not post the same things to all the pages, so make sure you're following us across all boards so you can see everything and our newest evidence, that because we're still rolling through backed up evidence, y'all. After the we had to take a break when the tornadoes came through, but we're trying to get back to it. So
and truly, if you really like I said, we behave when we're on here, but you can also go and become a Patreon member. Yeah, do that, because, child, you're gonna need to go to church after you hear some of the stuff we talked about. But you can become a Patreon member for $5, and we don't nickel and dime you and make you buy all different tiers. You get everything on one tier. You get Spirits with Shelly, you get Bedtime with Blake, and you get all of Ryan's reviews. And Ryan's got some interesting reviews up there. And if you want to know about Who's Willing to Eat Testicles, you should become a Patreon member, because we talked about that tonight. And Ryan, why don't you tell them how they can follow us even more?
Yeah,
go ahead. Try to follow my intro to you. Go ahead.
Go rate and review us on Apple Music and on Spotify. Leave a review. Like I said, the more you rate and review, and it boosts our signal, and the more people are going to be able to see us. And once again, subscribe to the Patreon. I'm going to eat something kind of. I'm gonna try a new soda. I think.
Stop telling what we talked about.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, that's content you got to pay for. So.
Obviously, Ryan gave away Who's Willing to Eat Testicles.
No, not me. I ain't eating no nuts.
Oh Lord, y'all go watch that damn Patreon. It was so freaking hilarious. But anyways, once again, thank y'all so much, and be on the lookout over the next couple of weeks for the tickets to go live for the Longview Museum again, where we're going to play with different toys that we've bought, and also another location that we will announce at a later date that will be later this year. So we're not going to give away.
Patreon members already know about it.
Yep. So if you want to find out what that location is, go become a Patreon member, because we revealed that tonight as well. Anyways, thank y'all so much for my friends Shelly Pruitt and Ryan Roberts. And my name is Blake Smith. And we will see you next Tuesday. Bye, y'all.